For this solid drawing exercise, we are going to practice making cylinders. So we are using this to create a sense of volume and depth in our animations or in our drawings. We are going to take and use an axis or a vertical line or diagonal line, and then we're going to add ellipses to it and then connect the two ellipses with lines in order to create our cylinders. All right, turn in your folder to a blank drawing exercise space. Make sure to write at the top cylinders and today's date. So for our cylinders, we are also going to be starting with ellipses. So I want you to start by making an ellipse on your paper. And then right below that, I want you to make one about the same size. Remember, we're drawing from our elbow, not our wrist or our fingers. We want to keep our lines nice and loose. Then you're going to connect the ends of these ellipses with two vertical lines. These lines are usually parallel. Now, if we look at this here on a cylinder, so I have a cylinder here, we can see the top part of the cylinder, but the can itself blocks the bottom part or the back part of our bottom ellipse. So what I can do here is erase this back part, and I can just go back over and reaffirm or redraw the lines that I want to keep so that they are nice and clear. Now, one thing we want to avoid, sometimes people will forget when they're making cylinders, they'll do the top cylinder, but then they'll come down and they'll use a flat line. That'll flatten your cylinder, so you want to avoid that. I'm going to start with an axis line here, and on that axis line, I'm going to tilt my ellipses. And the reason I'm doing this is because I'm tilting my cylinder, and I can connect my outside edges of both of these ellipses. And then the same thing as before, I can decide where do I want the top to be. So I'm going to keep the top right here, which then means I only get to keep the bottom part of the line here. I can draw this straight to connect, okay? Then I can take my eraser and just kind of lighten. I can also get rid of the axis line if I want to. Now we're going to take and we're going to flip the direction of the cylinder. So I want you to draw two ellipses that are vertical, okay? We're gonna again use horizontal lines that are parallel to each other. And this time we're going to keep the left end open for the end of our cylinder. And we're going to just use the far right side of our other ellipse for our cylinder. Okay, now we're gonna repeat this process, but we're gonna flip the direction of our cylinder. So I want you to start with two ellipses, connect with two horizontal parallel lines. Now this time, this is going to be the open side. This is the side that we see, which then means we can't see this part of our cylinder. So you can see how we're flipping the direction so it faces each direction. You can also take and work with different sizes of cylinders. So let's say I want to start with a very large cylinder at the bottom and a small cylinder at the top. I could do that. And then I'm just connecting my outside edges of my ellipses. And again, you can take and go around your edges, decide which direction the cylinder is going to face. You could take and you can make a really tall, narrow, almost like a tube for it. Now, another thing you can do with this is if you wanted to, you could take and whichever direction it's going, you're going to highlight that front part of your ellipse inside. So I can take and just show, okay, here's a curve, and here's a curve, and here's a curve, and here's a curve, and I can do that all the way to the base. And then remember, we only have one side showing. So this part would have a curve to it, and I would just keep the opening here at the top. So if you use lots of light, loose lines like me, you might retrace over them. Now, I want to take a look at what we can do if we alter the angles of our ellipse. So let's say I put an ellipse here, and I'm going to have a vertical ellipse here. Well, I can still connect the corners. So I connect the top corners and the bottom corners, and then my ellipse is actually going to be turning within here. So I can decide which end do I want to have an opening on. So I'm going to keep this as my opening. I make that a little bit darker. I make my outside edge a little darker. I follow this back curve here. Then I would keep this curve, keep this curve, keep this curve, keep this curve, and everywhere else I could take and erase the lines that are now blocked. And that gives you almost like a macaroni noodle shape. If you wanted to take this a step further, we could start with an ellipse here, an ellipse here, and we're going to draw almost like a curved worm shape. And it's the same thing. We're still following within our shape here, our elliptical shapes, and then we can decide, okay, I'm gonna flip the direction here. I'm gonna make this the open end, which means this is the solid end. So I erase this part here. So then I'm going to take and keep the top part of each of these ellipses to really accent the direction or the contour of this curved cylinder. I could also take and use a curved cylinder or curved lines to connect these. So for example, I'm going to take and really arch this here, and then remember each of my ellipses in the cylinder, I'm going to pick one side to follow on each of these, and then I'm going to erase the part that I can no longer see because it's blocked by the cylinder. Okay, so that is a way you can make different size cylinders.